Welcome back to the Quickbooks Video Series, hosted by Protea Academy. Today we'll be taking a look at entering vendor bills and expenses into QuickBooks. First, let's navigate to the left-hand panel and click on the Expenses tab. Under Expenses, click Expenses. This will open up the Expenses screen. Let's take a look at the few things you can do from the Expenses screen. You can create a bill, expense, check, vendor credit, credit card credit, and pay down the credit card. Today, we'll be focusing on the bill, expense, vendor credit, and credit card credit. Let's first take a look at the expense. Click on expense and this opens a separate tab. The difference between an expense and a bill is that an expense is something that has already been paid for, like a credit card receipt, or a cost coming straight out of your bank, where a bill will be processed to accounts payable, meaning that you still owe the vendor that money. Let's take a look at the detail on the expense screen. Let's first add in our payee's name and then choose which account we are going to have the expense paid from. We can change the date. Choose the payment method, either cash, check, or credit card, and then enter a reference number. For instance, a receipt number for a credit card transaction. At the bottom, we can see because we've used FedEx vendor before, it pre-processed our category, description, and amount. We can add further items to the description and change the amount if necessary. We can also add more details in the memo below. Let's quickly change the payee. If we change the payee, we get a warning. It says, do you want to pre-fill this expense and overwrite your entries using values from the contact's last expense? Be really careful when clicking yes. Let me show you. If I click yes, it overrides the information that I put in, changing the category, description, and the amount. Be careful when editing transactions that you don't click yes and it changes the amount of the transaction you had in QuickBooks when you only needed to change the date or description. Let's go back and choose FedEx and click Pre-fill No. When we click this, none of the details change and we need to fill in the details ourselves. I prefer this method as then I know the details are correct. Let's quickly update our details to match with FedEx. Let's keep looking at what else we can do on the expense tab. We can add lines to add multiple categories per expense. We can click clear invoice lines, which lets us start again. Let's quickly add in the details we had. We can also then click Export to CSV to get this expense into a CSV format. We can also upload attachments, which is quite a nice function. If we upload the receipt to the expense, we can then come back and see the detail or the audit trail and the document that relates to this expense all stored in QuickBooks. Once you're happy, you can have a few options of how to save. You can save, save and close, or save and new. Let's click on save so we can keep looking at the expense tab. At the bottom of the screen, we have two options, make reoccurring and more. Let's click on make reoccurring. This will make the expense reoccurring and appear in QuickBooks on regular intervals. As we can see, we can name the template and choose the intervals, whether it is scheduled and automatically appears, or whether you receive a reminder or is an unscheduled transaction. You can also create the expense a certain number of days in advance. Choose the payee and the payment account, and then the interval you want the expense to reoccur, like monthly on the last day of the month. You can then say every how many months you want it, including a start date, and end has a few options. You can either have no end date or end by a certain date, or end after a certain amount of occurrences, like if you have an annual subscription. Then choose the payment method and make sure your category, description, and amount is correct. You'll then save template. This will then bring the charge into QuickBooks every time you chose to make it reoccurring. Let's click cancel for now so we can take a look at the more option. Under more, we can have the copy function. Let's quickly click on copy and see how it works. Once you click copy, it brings up an exact replica of the expense we were doing. As you can see, everything has been copied over, including the category, description, and amount. Make sure to see this warning sign. This is a copy. That will show you that you're actually making a copy of the transaction and not just editing the transaction you already had in QuickBooks. Let's save this copy and carry on looking at the more function. You can also avoid an expense, which leaves the detail of the expense in QuickBooks, but turns the amount to 0. If you delete the expense, it will get rid of it completely from QuickBooks. We also then have Transaction Journal. Let's click on that to see what it brings up. Transaction Journal is a nice way of seeing exactly which account the entry goes to and shows you the debits and credits of your expense. Let's go back to our expense and look at Audit History, the last option under More. When you click on Audit History, it will bring up a separate screen showing exactly when the expense was created, by whom, and what exactly it said. If you edit the expense, it will show you on the timeline when it was edited, by who, and all the changes that have been made. Let's go back to our expense. Once we are happy with all the more options, we can then go and save and close our expense. This will bring us back to the expense screen. As you can see, here's our expenses we added for FedEx. You can also view and edit or click the drop-down menu for print, copy, delete, and void those expenses from the expense screen. On the expense screen, you can also change the category. But be careful because changing the category, they don't have a warning sign. Are you sure you want to change? So be careful not to accidentally change the category you should be using. In the right-hand corner, we can also export our expense list or print it. And under the gear icon, you can change the columns you are previewing. There's also a lot of filters we can do on the expense screen. You can filter by open expenses, overdue or paid expenses, and you can filter by delivery method or by certain dates. A nice way of filtering is also by payee or by category. If you click on the reset button, that will clear all the filters. In this drop-down menu, you can also filter quickly by your transaction type for only expenses or only bills. Let's go take a look at the bill screen. On the bill screen, we are able to add a new bill. Click on the green button. If you click the drop-down, you can upload a bill from your computer, or you can create a bill or create a recurring bill. Today, we're going to look at creating a bill. So let's go click on the Create Bill option. This will bring up the bill screen. The main difference on the bill screen is that instead of having a bank account you're paying it from, you have a vendor account. As I mentioned previously, the main difference is that a bill means you still owe the vendor that money. Let's choose a vendor and select our terms. The terms are really important to get your AP aging summary correct, because this is how it brings up if your bill is overdue or in current status on your AP aging summary. Let's choose a date for this bill. As you can see, the due date is net 30. Once you press tab, the due date will automatically populate for the net 30 terms. Let's enter a bill number. This is really important to get right in QuickBooks, as QuickBooks will identify if you're adding a bill with the same number. So, in other words, making a duplicate of a bill you already have in QuickBooks. For companies that process many bills per month, this is really important to make sure you're not processing bills in duplicate. We then have the category, description, and amount columns, which are similar to the expense transaction we entered previously, as well as the memo block, where we can add further details. Again, we can upload attachments, which is really helpful that you have the backup and the bill attached to the transaction. We also have the add lines, clear lines, and export CSV. You can also have a few options for uploading documents to this device. Once we're happy with the bill, we can click on the save and close, or save and schedule a payment. We'll look at the save and schedule payment in the next video. Let's click save for now. As you can see at the bottom, our options to make reoccurring and more are the same. If you click the Make Reoccurring tab, the same screen as for the expenses will come up. Under the More tab, we have the Copy, Delete, Transaction Journal, and Audit History, all the same as what we viewed under the expenses. Let's save and close this bill. We can now see under Unpaid, we have the bill we just created. You can see it showing as overdue. This is because of the terms and the date we put into the bill. If we go to the Pay tab, we'll see bills that we previously paid in the last 12 months. Let's go back to the Unpaid tab. We can also have a few filters under the Unpaid section, by vendor or by date. You can also schedule a payment from this screen or mark the bill as paid, view or edit bills, duplicate the bill, or delete the bill. Let's go look at the Vendor tab. Let's go find our insurance agency so we can take a better look at what is under the insurance agency vendor. If we look here, we'll see the vendor details. Let's click on Transaction List. This is where bills and expenses that we previously created will sit. As you can see, here's an expense from a previous date, as well as the bill we created today. You'll see in the summary, it says we have an open balance of $2,000. That's because when you create a bill, it means you still owe the vendor that amount. Under new transactions, you can also create your bills and expenses here in the individual vendor account. Let's go take a look at vendor credits. Click on vendor credit. A vendor credit is maybe a discount received, or if you were billed incorrectly, or if your bill is under dispute, or if you've received product back and you need to create a credit to the amount you owe the vendor. The vendor credit screen looks very similar to the bill screen, having the vendor name, payment date, reference number, category, description, and amount columns, all the same. You always process the amount in positive. QuickBooks will automatically recognize that a credit should be a negative amount. You can also upload any backup you have to the credit. Let's save and close this vendor credit. As we can see on our insurance agency vendor tab, we now have the $500 credit. As you can see, our open balance is $1,500, but our overdue payments, which are just our bills, is $2,000. We'll look at setting these off in the next video. Over here, we can also apply filters to our vendor screen by open, status, This will show any items that are open or unpaid. We can also filter by overdue. So this comes back to those terms we put in. Any amounts unpaid by the due date will filter under undue. And we can also filter by paid, or by date, or by category. Clicking the reset button will clear any filters we previously had. Over here, you can also see all transactions, or just your bills, or just your expenses. Let's quickly take a look at report and our accounts payable aging summary. As we can see in our insurance agency, we have one item in 1 to 30 days and one item in 31 to 16 days. These are based on those terms we put in the bill. If we click on the total, you'll also see the detail that makes up the balance. This is why it's important to get our terms right, to make sure that our AP aging summary is correct. We'll look at setting these amounts off in the next video. Let's go back to our expenses tab. Let's look under new transactions and credit card credit. A credit card credit is any credit you receive on your credit card. Let's take a look at DoorDash. Assuming we used some points to redeem our food that we ordered, and therefore on our credit card statement, we got a credit card credit. Select the date, reference number, category, description, and amount that we'll be using. Again, we have to process this in positive. QuickBooks will recognize that it's a credit card credit and put it in negative automatically. We can also add attachments, make reoccurring, the same as on all the other transactions we've done today. If we go back to the vendor tab and we go look at DoorDash, we'll now see the negative sitting in our DoorDash account. Let's go look at the plus new sign. Under vendors, we can see that we can also create our expense, bill, vendor credit, or credit card credit in the plus new tab. Thanks for watching QuickBooks Video Series hosted by Protea Academy. The next episode, we'll look at vendor payments.